Today I'm going to show you how I install one of the most fundamental pieces of hardware, a butt hinge. Butt. So here are the tools that I use to get the job done. A marking gauge, a chisel, an adjustable square, an X-Acto knife, and a router with a small straight bit. Now the router is actually optional here. You could really just use your chisel to take out all the stock and fine-tune the fit of the hinge, but the router really will speed things up, and once you have that depth set, it gives you a nice consistent depth from hinge to hinge and really does make the job go quite a bit faster. Now you'll notice I'm working on one of the case sides here first. It's going to be a lot harder to put these mortises in these locations once there's a top and a bottom and all the other pieces are put together. So this is something I need to do early. Later on, I'm not going to be able to show you that step right now, but later on I will put the doors up to the case and transfer the locations of these marks directly to the doors to make sure that I get the perfect fit and each hinge is perfectly located. But for now, we're going to focus directly on the case. Now the first step is to get to know your hinge. This particular hinge is perfect for a 3/4 inch door, and that's what we have here. And the distance from the end of the leaf of the hinge to the middle of the barrel is about 3/4 of an inch. And ideally, that's the kind of spacing you want. When this is on the surface here, you want the edge, the front of the workpiece, to be at the point that it's about halfway into this barrel. Okay, so that is the measurement we're really concerned with as far as how deep or how far back that hinge goes. So I'm going to use my marking gauge here, and I'm actually going to set it so that it is directly in the middle of that barrel, just like so. And once you have that setting, it's really as simple as transferring that to your actual workpiece. But before we do that, we do need to know where these hinges are going to be located. General rule of thumb that I like to use, well, two things that you have to consider. You have to consider the doors. So the rails of the doors may be in certain positions. In general, it's nice to have that hinge right above where that bottom rail is and right below where the top rail is, if you can. And sometimes certain door styles, not styles, S-T-Y-L-E-S is what I'm referring to. A different style of a door may dictate that the rail is thinner and it won't really work to have this right above the rail. In that case, then I just simply go a hinge length from the top and a hinge length from the bottom, and those would be my two locations. So now once you have the general location set for your two hinges, it's not a bad idea to use a story stick at this point if you've got a number of these to do, and this actually may come in handy for locating the hinges onto the doors themselves, is to have something with those marks located on them that is a reference for you. So generally you call that a story stick. Now this is one that I got from woodpeckers. I didn't really know how much I would ever really use this, and frankly I don't use it that often because it's so easy to just grab a piece of wood, lay it on the surface and put your marks on it like a traditional story stick. But this one's kind of neat. It's got these little tabs on here to set your locations. So you basically reference it from the top of the leg and run it down. I can't because my clamp is there, but you have the locations here. So now when I have to do the other one, I just pop it up on the bench, drop this down, and I mark those locations. And I can make sure that everything is consistently located from one cabinet side to the other. But once you have these marks here, you need to then basically slice across the grain. Just like any type of inlay, we just did an inlay video recently that showed you how to trace around an oddly shaped workpiece. Well, this is really the same thing, only it's a lot easier because it's a nice rectangular shape. It's really not that difficult to do. So basically, you just want to make sure that your hinge fits in between those two lines, so you're not making it too big or too small. And in fact, just to double check myself, here's what I like to do. I'll take my top line here, and I grab my adjustable square, and I'm going to put a cut line, scribe a line right where that pencil line is. Now I don't need to go too deep, I just want to slice across the grain. Once I have a reasonable cut there, I go back to my hinge, and I'm pretty sure that my pencil line is a good accurate measurement, but I want to make sure. So what I'll do is put the put the X-Acto knife into the slot that I just cut. Then I pull the hinge across until it makes contact with that X-Acto knife. Okay, so I know it's right up against it. And then I'll come back over to this side, putting pressure on that hinge, and I'll make a little mark. Just basically start a cut. You don't want to go too far because right now the hinge may not be perfectly square. I just want a starting point. And now that starting point is enough that I could very easily, with my X-Acto knife, move it across and get it locked down into that little slot. And then I can bring my square up to the X-Acto knife, hold it nice and tight in position. Now it happens to be right on my pencil line, right? So that's a good thing. We measured properly, but this is just to me it's a little bit of an insurance policy that you're taking your final measurement directly from your hinge and not from what we thought was the right measurement. You don't want to find out after the fact that you cut your mortise too wide. So now the final thing that we have to do is account for the thickness of the hinge. Now you can easily do that using the marking gauge again and adjust it for the thickness of the hinge. Mark along the side here, and then just use your chisel and chisel away all the excess and go back to your lines. Like I said, that's perfectly viable. It's just a little bit longer than I really want to devote to this part of the project. I really like to use a router for this operation. So what I've got is my little Bosch Colt here, which is perfect for this type of thing. And I put the hinge on the base and adjust my router bit so that it's perfectly even with the hinge. And if you're not sure, put some pressure down on the hinge, make sure it's nice and flat, and then bring some sort of straight edge across. And you barely just want to feel the tip of that router bit touching your straight edge. Okay, and if it's just a hair, I mean just a little hair proud, so that you're making this a little bit deeper, that's really not that big of a deal. You just don't want the hinge to sit proud of this surface. But usually with this, you even have a little micro adjustment here. It's pretty easy to nail it so that you get it perfectly where you need it to be. And at least again, with the router, it's going to be consistent for all 4 of these that I do. Now, no matter how confident you are that you have that router set perfectly, it's always a good idea to do a test run in a piece of scrap and test for yourself. And if it feels perfectly flush, you're good to go. Now don't be tempted to get it all with the router. As you start to approach that line, you could see it gets a little bit dicey, so leave yourself a little bit of room and then just come back with your chisel, drop it right down into your scribe line, like so, and chop down. We're going to do the cross grain cuts first. There we go. Okay. Let's do the other side. When you have this little area back here, there's a little excess of material. Sometimes I like to cut that up a little bit just to relieve some of that pressure. Okay, right into the scribe line once again. Looking pretty good. And now we can go with the grain. If we chop here first, instead of doing the end grain first, we run the risk of splitting this piece along this grain line. So we always want to do that end grain first. Any excess, I just kind of trim away, referencing from the bottom. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's see how we did. There you go. See, no movement at all, sits right in, nice and flush. That's perfect.
I'm just going to interrupt myself for a minute here. Not sure what I was thinking at the time, but that mortise is not perfect. You see that little gap here? That's not cool, and I would not have left that in my final product. Fortunately, if you look here, you can see the barrel is not quite at the halfway point. This means if I remove just a little bit of material over here, the hinge will sit perfectly square as intended. Okay, back to the show.
Now I won't be fully installing this hinge until everything is together. As long as the mortise is there, it's going to be very easy to pre-drill and add the screws, so that's really no problem. The doors are going to be done in much the same way, except for I'm going to use the workpiece itself to transfer the locations of these mortises to those doors. Very similar to what I did for the gadget station, if some of you remember that installation. And beyond that, that's really just about it. The doors are 3/4 of an inch, and so is this hinge. So this hinge leaf will actually span the entire door. There won't be any material behind the hinge, so we're going to go across the entire thickness of that door, the door style. So that's really about it. This is my standard procedure for pretty much every butt hinge that I've ever installed. I just find it the easiest way to go and very quick. So hopefully you'll be able to try some of this on your own and let me know what kind of results you get. Thanks for watching.